Up next on Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com, Solo 101. Welcome to, I think, episode 177 of Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com. I'm Brian Bielanski. Joining me tonight is, for a great show, one I've been wanting to do for a long time. Solo 101 is the Pro Solo 101 is the topic. We've already done Solo 101 a long time ago. Pro Solo 101, David and Kim Whitener. Welcome. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Great to have you on the show. I appreciate it. Brian Mason connected us. I said, I want to do something on Pro Solo. I said, can you get me a guest, someone who'd be good? And he said, I got better than a guest for you. I've got two guests for you. And they're both fast, and they're both really cool. And he said, you got to get a hold of David and Kim. So we are here. Welcome. We start every show with the same question, so you'll each get to answer it. And it is, how did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
So back in 2002, we bought a Subaru WRX.
Okay.
In the glove box back then, it came with a free SCCA membership.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
You know, we had no idea what that was. I think it said you got a free magazine, and I was like, well, I want a free magazine.
Sure.
And then I think it came with a DVD. Once you sent it in, it was like, here's all the things you can do with your car. And we were like, let's go out and try out a local autocross, and tried it out. It was like, this is really fun. I think like our first event or two, some people grabbed us and was like, you should help administrate the club. And we got roped into doing that.
Wow.
And the rest, so.
In the first event, or like, did they let you have a chance to decide whether you liked it or not?
It really was, I think, the first event or two.
He's like, new people. Let's get them in.
We've got new blood. Yeah, I know how that works. We like to try to hook people in. We feel like getting them involved will keep them around, and it does either one of two things. It hooks them in, and it's great, or it scares them away, and they never come back again. So that's fantastic. And this was, you guys are based in the Dallas area, right?
Yeah.
Is there a big solo scene in the Dallas area?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I think there's 3 or 4 clubs.
Okay.
So, multiple weekends every month you can go out and autocross. So,
are they all SCCA clubs, or is there a Porsche club? Is it a bunch of different types?
Yeah, we've got Porsche Club, BMW, SCCA, and there's an independent club called Equipped. So,
Okay. I don't think a lot of people realize that you can go and play with other organizations when you start getting involved, especially on the autocross side of things. There's a lot of these little car clubs out there who do their own thing, and they do essentially the same thing we do, and they love to have our money to go play with them, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love running with SCCA, both locally and nationally, but I think here in our area right now, I think the BMW club events are my most favorite events. They're just, you get more runs. They cap them, I think, at like 60 people. So it's like a niche event. So you get more seat time. So, but I mean, I enjoy both, but it's nice that there's just a little bit different way of doing things. So.
Got it. And Kim, I'm assuming that's when you got involved the same way. Did you have any racing experience or background before that?
No racing experience background. We were actually married in 2002. So this was our first, really bad financial decision to buy a new car.
So,
the one of many to come.
So were you all in right from the start, or did you kind of go in to see what David was doing and then you kind of find, I could do this too?
So I think David went to the first one. He came back and he was like, you should try this out. We did. I showed up. There was, a separate ladies class where I could run, and that was incredibly helpful and valuable in getting me involved and making, me feel like I had a place to play where I didn't have to be, top of the top day one, and just continued with it. So it's been good.
I think that autocross is kind of interesting in its motorsports place in the world, where you are competing against other people, but in essence, you're also really competing against yourself. So when you're first starting out, you don't have to worry about, obviously you don't want to finish last. Trust me, I know all about that. But you're just looking at your times for every run, and you're trying to make yourself better each time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did you guys really start to get competitive?
So like the club we raced at initially, they had this weird system. It continues to this day. And they, even for a local event, they pay cash out for the top places in PAX results.
Really?
So first place in PAX, you paid $30 to enter and you won $40. And they paid the same for women's as they did for men. So I think that first couple events, we were like, oh, wow, she was getting, $30 every time. And it was like, we should be a little more serious about this. So even the first season, I think we were thinking about PAX results and like what was competitive and stuff like that. So that definitely, I think, hooked us quite a bit. I think though, we probably, autocrossed locally for about 5 years. And then we met Ann and Andy Hollis.
Yep.
And they like started nudging us, like, you should try out some national events. And we went to a few of them and really enjoyed it. And there's also just a community of couples that you meet at those events you see over and over. And that was something, the social aspect of that was something we really enjoyed. So
yeah, definitely started at like the national tour level. And then our first solo nationals was the last year in Topeka, 2009. I think
it was like 08.
08.
Okay.
And then we've been coming nationals ever since. And our first pro solo, we actually tried out in 2010.
Great. And now do you do mostly national tour type stuff? Or are you still doing a lot of your local events also?
I would say David probably does more local events than I do. At this point, we do travel quite a bit to try and hit up a lot of the national events, especially pro solo. There's a whole point series involved that I'm sure we'll get to at some point. And so traveling a lot and then also working through the week, like I tend to, value a few weekends off here and there.
So yeah, she mostly does nationals. I do, a full suite of local events. I try to go to the track once a week. We have like a country club track membership here.
Okay.
And then I do trials. I'm going to time trials nationals.
Nice.
And then I did 2 seasons of road racing. So I might start that back up next year as well. So
cool. And what do you compete in at the pro solos and the solos?
Yeah.
This year we are in a FRS in STX.
Okay. Is this your first year in that Scion?
Yes.
What made you go to the Scion?
We've tended to enjoy small, lightweight rear-wheel drive cars, or at least not necessarily rear-wheel drive, but just smaller, lighter cars. You don't have to worry about tire costs. I mean, they're just general running costs are less expensive. And we generally want to race something that, like, if we take it to the track, if you put it into a wall, like, I don't really have to worry so much about it as far as like the overall cost. So like, we could afford to race a more expensive car, but we can't afford for me to ball it up.
Right.
So all of that stuff we really liked. And it just seemed like that was a class that there was a lot of opportunity in to develop things that people hadn't done. So I was just looking at that going like, hey, I think there's a great opportunity here. And for us as well with the pros, every single year we're studying the rules and the indexes and figuring out like which class is going to be the strategically the best place to go. So
it also helped our decision in that last year at the pro finale, we were racing an STS Mazda Miata, and the engine went during that event. And so from that point on, we had to make some decisions no matter what. So
right. Yeah, that's easy to get when you have when the decision is forced upon you. It's like, now is the time to either put a new engine in this car or find something else different. I get that completely. And so you don't have an unlimited budget? You said you were worried about having a car that you could ball up and not shocking to see racers that don't have an unlimited budget, right?
Well, after you total a few cars, reality sort of sets in. So
there's some stories you want to tell us, Kim, about him totaling a few cars?
No, we'll stay married for now.
Okay. All right. It's just the 3 of us here. No one else is watching, just so you know. So I brought you here tonight to talk about Pro Solo, and because I think there's some people out there that might not even know what it is, and I've never done a Pro Solo. So the way we do these Solo 101s, or these 101 episodes, is in some cases I act like I've never done it, because there's not a whole lot of things in this club I haven't done at least once. But in this particular case, I've actually never done a pro solo, so I won't be acting tonight. I will actually be the newbie here, and we're going to go through kind of what you need to do to go to a pro solo. And I guess we should start with the premise that most people would go to an autocross first, so it wouldn't be like they've never done a solo before. So let's start with that, because I don't think anybody just decides to go pro solo, because that's kind of just the name pro sounds intimidating. I wouldn't choose to do that first. So let's say I've done a handful of solos, the pro solos come into town, and I'm like, okay, I want to try this. What do I need to know? Do I need to, from a car standpoint, do I need anything different to go pro solo than I would have to go regular autocrossing?
You don't need anything different on your car. The only thing I would say is you might be in a different class.
Okay.
So the pro solo sometimes groups a group of classes together into an index class.
Okay.
And it's based on previous year participation, numbers, etc., especially with the ladies. So we have 4 ladies classes. And so instead of running, like, for example, STXL, they group ladies classes together based on power to weight, tires, other things. There was a big class shakeup at the end of last year. But all that to say, your car is the same, but your class might be a little bit different.
And one other thing, let's say if you had like a B Street car, I'm just using this as an example,
Sure.
This might not be accurate. Some of those are split. So like if you're a all-wheel drive car, you might go to this index class. And if you're a 2-wheel drive car, you might go to a different index class. So just because obviously there's a launch in the Pro Solo, we can go over the format a little bit in a minute, but the launch is such a big part of your time. Sometimes they split those out. So
all of the cars in a particular class might not necessarily, all of the cars in a particular solo class might not go to the same pro solo class.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
Got it. And the index, is that kind of somewhat related to the packs, or is that the same type of index that they use to come up with the classes?
It's not made by Rick Ruth, who makes packs. So like the SCCA officials meet once a year and decide, but they're taking the launch into account.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of adjustment there based on, how classes did last year. And they're thinking through, okay, the top cars in this class have a ton of horsepower. We can look at, how fast their 60-foot times were last year. And they're adjusting those indexes based on that. But it's a similar concept to packs.
Got it. All right. So I've decided to do this. We've kind of figured out what class I'm going to be in. I show up on race day, and what do I have to think about?
Well, I would say, there's not a lot that's radically different. So let's say, first, let's just go back to what the format is.
Sure.
So compared to a normal autocross, it has a drag start. So 2 cars are going to start next to each other. And unlike a normal event where someone says, hey, go, and then you launch and your time starts when you launch.
Okay.
In this, it's just like drag racing. So your time starts when you go on green. When the light turns green, the time is running. And if you sit there for a few seconds, that's just adding to your time. So that's definitely the biggest difference, first of all. Then 2 cars are next to each other. Now, during the event, this really doesn't matter. They're going to launch. Typically, they're going to one turns right, one turns left, and then they're going to go through a mirror image course.
Okay.
However, sometimes the courses are completely different left to right. And then your time when you finish of your best left and your best right, that determines who wins the class. So that's going to be the biggest difference in format. As far as what's different and what to prepare for, I would say the biggest difference is, unlike a normal autocross you've done before, all of the runs are back to back. So you make a run, then you immediately go to the other side and make another run, and that repeats till you make 4 runs. And that's something that I think catches a lot of people off guard, because you're used to, I make a run, then I go back to grid and I sit there for 10 minutes before I go again. So the fact that you have to immediately pull back up to the line with no delay, that's something that throws people off. They're just not used to. So
interesting.
And so like you'll have 3 sessions. So there will be a Saturday morning session, and each session you take these 4 runs. So you take a right, left.
Okay.
Or 2 on each side, alternating. You go take a run, you come back, you get back in line, and you go make your next run. So it's 4 back-to-back, like David was talking about, but you get to do that 3 times.
Okay.
And your best right and your best left then count towards the class win. So you could have your best right in the Saturday morning session, your best left in Sunday morning, and those two get added together for your time.
Got it. And when you pull up to the tree, to the start line, are you competing against the person next to you, or are you just competing against times like you are at an autocross, and in the end, whatever the best time is wins?
So it's time. So it's like your normal autocross, but it's typically someone you are in the same class as competing against.
Okay.
But the who finishes first doesn't directly affect anything.
Got it. Does that ever come into play where you're just on a one-on-one car against car, driver against driver situation?
Yeah. So you have your best left and your best right. You have 3 sessions. So Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning.
Okay.
And at the end of that, they crown class winners are crowned.
Okay.
So you could say you're the winner of H Street. And after that, the competition completely changes. So it turns into almost like a separate event. And that's called the challenges.
Okay.
And it's going to be a ladies challenge, a bonus challenge, and a super challenge. And in those challenges, you're going to pull up, and now you are head to head with one other person.
Okay.
And so let's say you're in an H Street car and I'm in an A mod car. So you won your class with a 45-second time.
Right.
And I won my class with a 35-second time. So now your tree is going to go down, yellow, 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 green, and I have to wait at the tree for 10 whole seconds before I'm allowed to launch. And then whoever finishes first is who wins. So at that point, you're seeing some faster cars that are catching up to a slower car, and it's all based on how you did in your class.
So it's bracket racing.
It's bracket racing, yeah.
So
but your bracket is set by how well you did in class.
I love to be able to show this off. This was my first and only drag race ever. I had a Chevy Cavalier, and
Awesome.
I beat a Corvette. At the high school drags at Great Lakes Dragway in southern Wisconsin, and my first and only. I figured I came in first, and I'm like, I'm never doing it again because you can't get better than first. And I actually didn't really like drag racing that much to do it. I love watching it, but so it's bracket racing at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's also it's also becomes more of a spectator sport.
Sure.
So even if you make it into one of those challenges, it's still pretty exciting to watch.
Yeah. And then do you go one-on-one and you go to so is it like a tournament at that point where the best drivers get to go a couple of times and actually crown one final champion?
Yes, but I'm gonna put an asterisk on this. So
okay.
It is a bracket tournament. However, this one specific year, they're trying a weird format for the Super Challenge.
Okay.
And it's so complicated, it's probably not even worth explaining. It's extremely complicated.
Got it.
It's probably something they're only doing this year. So
this is year 2 already.
Okay, well, it's 2 years of it, but it's extremely complicated, but I'm just assuming we're probably going back to the bracket next year is my guess.
It's more like the Formula One qualifying, I think. It's like extra sessions. It's only also done the Super Challenge. So the Ladies Challenge is still run like it was, call it 3 years ago, where it's that true bracket, and you ultimately end up with an ultimate overall win. Mm-hmm.
And if it's my first pro solo, I'm probably not going to be involved in that anyway. So I don't have to worry about that just yet.
So fun fact, that's where the bonus challenge comes in.
Okay.
So for anyone who doesn't make it into the challenge, so the challenge is seeded by the first place finishers in each of the classes.
Okay.
And filled in to the second place person who's closest to the first place.
Okay.
So that differential, the smaller the differential, the more likelihood you get into the challenge. The Super Challenge is 32 people in the open class competition. Ladies Challenge is based on the overall number of ladies who are participating.
Okay.
So if we have, I think, more than 30, then we get a 16-car challenge.
Makes sense.
Then based on that,
bonus
challenge. So if you're not into the challenge, you can put your name into a hat, and there's a drawing done after regular class competition ends, and they draw a name and they draw a second name, and that's who you're paired up against.
Okay.
And it's an 8. 8 or 16 car bonus challenge that happens.
But they just draw names of people that didn't make it into one of the challenges. You get an opportunity to run that.
Yeah.
And then your dial-in is based on just however you ran in class. So
Right.
at that point, the results are wildly all across the board because you've got people that did well, you have people that are mid-pack and back of the pack, and it just whoever's the most consistent is going to win. So,
and I guess to that point, I don't think we touched on this, but if you are the second place person who gets put into the challenge, like the super challenge, your dial-in is actually based on the class leader's time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the difference. The ladies challenge, the open challenge, super challenge, your dial-in is based on your class leader's time. The bonus challenge, your dial-in is your own dial-in. And so it's much, you can be consistent and go a very long way in the bonus challenge.
That's interesting because that kind of makes a seeding process like they do in a basketball tournament where you've got the first seed and the 64 seed, whereas you have to compete at the time of the faster car. So that faster car has a slight advantage if you're close enough. And so that's kind of almost a way to do a seeding process. Very, very interesting. Okay, cool.
One last interesting thing too is it's based on the class winner's fastest raw time. So if the class winner goes out there and hits a bunch of cones and they run a time that's impossible, that's their dial-in. So sometimes you'll see weird stuff where, like, if I'm out there and I know I hit a cone, a lot of times I'll get to the finish line and slow way down to make sure that is not my fastest time. Or a lot of times between the two of us, we run radios because that, like radios are allowed in Pro Solo. So I'll be watching her runs. If she hits a cone, I'll radio and she knows to slow down before the finish line to not mess up her dial-in.
I feel like we might be beyond one at this point, but it's at least good to know because you will see people out there with radios, and to know that there's a separate rule about that.
What's going on?
It's completely allowed and legal within Pro Solo.
Okay. What would be the other purpose for the radios? Is that pretty much it?
So during the challenge, it's head-to-head, right? So if you and I are up against each other, we're head-to-head. And even though we're going to launch at different times, whoever finishes first wins. So in that situation, I have a radio and Kim is watching you, not me.
Right.
You hit a cone, she will tell me over the radio, and then I back off just a little bit, just a tiny hair to make mess it up.
So you're like the spotter.
Exactly. But you're spotting the competitor, person you're helping.
That's very interesting. This has become like something I want to do now. There's a lot more into this than just going to your regular autocross, isn't there?
Things where you start to the first one and you just try and figure it out. Right. There's a lot happening. You have 3 sessions. With the 3 sessions, especially knowing that I feel like we're a little bit all over the place.
That's okay.
Knowing that you have these 3 sessions, depending on the number of people in the event, if there's like 4 groups, you could be hot swapping workers. So there's just it's constant movement and action. Unlike the solo events, the national tours, where it's like, go make a run, go back to grid, go make a run, wait 5 minutes, etc. It's just much more fast paced. And because you are running twice in that first day, you're really staying on top of who's running, when is it my turn, etc. The other thing I will say is, so when you start that morning session on Saturday, the first session, you are gridded and paired. So you go up to the line in pairs, because you have a right and a left side. You're paired based on numerical car order. Right. So I'm number car 1, and there's the next car's number 5. Right. We're going to be paired together. When you come to that next session, Saturday afternoon, the grid changes. So the grid is reordered based on the fastest drivers. So now fastest driver number 1 is on the left, and the second fastest driver would be paired on the right against that person. So you have the first and second place person in class going out at the same time. Right. And so you can see their results at the same time. And then for that third session, Sunday morning, you're regridded again based on those results that happened at the end of Saturday afternoon. And so things are changing and moving, and it is different than a national tour, but it's exciting, and you don't have to be a professional to do Pro Solo. Right. And honestly, it's my favorite format.
So 2 things on what she said. I think she said it briefly, but just to touch on it more. At the Pro, there are no worker there's no stops to change workers.
Okay.
So that's one big thing that gets a lot of people out, is that you have to constantly be paying attention to who's running.
Sure.
To like, when do I need to be there to work? When do I need to be there to get my car up? And typically the event accelerates. So if you're like, okay, hey, I should have an hour, yesterday at this point in time, I had a full hour before I needed to be up there. The event accelerates. So typically day 2, there's lots of people that tend to show up late to grid. That's like pretty common.
So on the first session, if I'm racing Kim and she kicks my butt, and David, you're slow too, you would maybe be with me in the back and Kim would be up front, and then it gets regridded each time.
Yeah. And so then think about when you pull up, even though the results of who finishes first don't directly matter, there's something psychological about it. Going out next to this other person, you're looking across at them. And a lot of times when you finish, you're looking across to see where you are at the course. And just psychologically, that's something that gets in a lot of people's heads, the pressure and pace of it.
And you really need to pretend like there's nobody there, right?
For a lot of people, yes. I think for me, it's something that motivates me.
Okay.
Thinking about, sometimes that gets me amped up to think about. So, and there's a lot of, we're getting into pro solo advanced stuff here, but you've done drag racing. There's some gamesmanship at the line, like doing burnouts. Our car for years, we raced a Miata, and I spent hours one day tuning the launch control, and I tried every possible setting with one goal, and to make the meanest, gnarliest sounding launch control possible. It was this little tiny 1.6 Miata, but it had a really loud launch control. So sometimes somebody would come up next to me, they've never heard it, and I'll just let it wail. We're doing a big burnout, covering them in smoke, and that just gets in people's heads.
Sure.
It's just part of it.
Sure. Gamesmanship. That's probably on the 7th pro solo, not on the 1st.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love that.
Be prepared if it is your first time to tune out what's going on next to you.
Yeah.
You may have some crazy turbo car that's going to pull up next to you and make all this noise. Your cabin may fill with smoke, and you just got to tune that out and not pay attention to it. So, yeah.
So let's get in a little bit about the nuts and bolts. Okay. Like pulling up to the line. I'm not assuming, I'm going to guess that it's very similar to actual drag racing, which I have just a little bit of familiarity with. You pull up and you get the yellow lights until you get to the staging lights and all that. Is it kind of the same way?
Yeah. So there's they'll sort of have 2 lanes forward, and there's a green zone, and in the green zone, is green's first and then's yellow, right?
No, green is where you can do burnout.
So first there's a yellow zone, and this is where your friends can stand around, they can talk to you. There's people walking around, there's a bunch of cars lined up, but you cannot do a burnout in this area. This is like a spectator safe area for people to stand.
You also cannot make changes that leave residue on the ground. So you can't spray your tires. So in between those 4 hot runs, you cannot water spray your tires or do things like that.
And you can't warm your tires like with blankets anywhere. Okay. Not in paddock, not in grid, not before. It is not allowed at all during the event ever.
Okay.
That's the difference that catches people out of guard. But you're pulling up in the first area is the yellow zone. It's yellow, right? Okay. So in yellow, people can check your tires. People can talk to you. You can't really get out of the car though. So you're keeping on rolling forward. Someone scans your helmet, and then you cross over into the green zone. And in the green zone, no one can stand there, but you can do whatever you want. You can do a burnout. You have to wait for the car in front of you to go.
Sure.
But when the car in front of you goes, you can do a burnout or whatever you want. And so you can get your tires all warmed up. And then once you pull forward, there's a pre-stage beam, a stage beam, and you need to activate both of those before the clock goes down.
Right.
So there's a shot clock running. Yep. So usually there's like a 15-second timer between the time the pair goes in front of you and the time you have to do your burnout and to move into the stage.
Okay. Yep. And if you're not there, it's going to go without you regardless.
Right. So the starter, once they push the button, if you're not stage, it's a not stage, and you get a DNF for that run because you weren't properly staged when they pressed the button.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. The burnout zone, do they wet that down for you or?
No.
Okay. So there'll be no burnouts with the Honda Fit. We'll start with that. Without doing a huge, it's also an automatic transmission Honda Fit, so it would be a neutral drop to get that going.
might not be a good idea.
Yeah,
So.
we probably won't be doing that part. That won't be happening. And then you mentioned that a lot of times the courses are mirrored, but sometimes they're not. Does it really not make a difference because you're going back and forth and it's just raw time?
It's a little bit harder to gauge where you are relative to your competitors when they're not mirrored, right? You could have a several second differential between the right side and the left side, and then you have to start doing math in your head, like which side am I on, and am I on the faster side? But generally speaking, I think they try to do mirror courses where they can, and some sites are just smaller and due to the layout, they have to adjust.
It's also like, if it's not mirrored, that's 2 courses you have to memorize.
Right.
And especially sometimes we had some this last year where I think like one course designer did the right side and one course designer did the left. And they required just a really radical different driving philosophy. And that's something that threw people off.
Right.
So you have to be super aggressive on one side and really precise on the other. That's something I think that can throw some drivers off. So, allowing a little more time to memorize the course is really good. And then one more thing too on the burnouts, I was going to say is that, and the whole like nuts and bolts of the staging is that Friday before the pro solo, there's always practice starts. And so they'll open up those drag lanes for a few hours. And I think it's like usually $10 for 4 passes.
Okay.
And you 4 passes to go up there and run that. That's definitely something that if you've never done it before, it's a good idea. And even for us that have done it, a million times, if it's a surface that we've never been to or a car we've never been to, we always go and we'll be doing, sometimes 10, 20, 30 burnouts, 10, 20, 30 launches to dial in our launch.
Got it.
So for a novice, that's not as important, but just doing a few of them to get a sense of the pace is really valuable.
Sure. I think the other thing to mention in terms of that, usually the week before the event, SCCA started over the last couple of years doing like a novice drivers meeting, but through Zoom.
Oh, okay.
So you can dial in, like it's an evening, a day or two before the event, and they'll go over the basics.
Right.
That way, if you've just never done it before, they used to do the drivers meeting like that for the novices at the site, and they've moved that to a couple days in advance to be prepared. The other thing is, I know you mentioned, I show up race morning and what do I do? Really, you want to show up the day before race morning, right? So that Friday before to do these practice launches, to get registered, to get teched, all of the things you need to do. And also if it's your first one, right, just to like acclimate to the site so that it's not like completely overwhelming when you show up that morning.
I think also there's starting line, right? So like it used to be Evo School did it. Now there's a starting line school that SCCA runs.
Sure.
And you're going to do practice starts. But they're going to walk through it sort of holding your hand. So instead of a 15-second, they're going to give you a minute or two to like get staged the first time and understand how it all works. And then they slowly ramp up the speed as you do more and more to what the speed would be at the real event. And so that's a really good one. If someone's never done it and you're apprehensive about it, that's really valuable to do. Yeah. So we did it back when Evo School was running the program.
Got it. Interesting. So if the courses are mirrored, how important is it do you have to spend a lot of time on both courses to kind of learn them because they go in a different direction? Or does your brain work, because I've never done it before, does your brain work after learning one course and saying, okay, it's just a flip-flop?
If they're truly mirrored, yes.
Okay.
What gets people is if they're just slightly off a little bit. That's one thing that starts to mess people up is they're like, man, I'm just never getting this right side. Well, you're not getting the right side because just the little difference in it is messing you up. You're trying to drive the right like it is the left. Well, I do feel like if they are very well mirrored, that your brain just sort of can flip-flop pretty well between the two.
Do they tell you when you get there if they're truly mirrored, or do you have to figure that all out on your own?
Usually have to figure it out.
Okay.
It's usually pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Do I have to bring anything else different with me? I mean, it's the same gear, right?
I would say no. I mean, there's not really anything else you really need. And if you're a solo driver, you don't have a co-driver, you don't need a tire sprayer. There's no opportunity to use it.
Right.
You don't need blankets. You're not allowed to use them. Some things like that you wouldn't need. I would say the one thing would be preparing as far as like it's tangential to gear is that if you are someone that likes to check your tires between runs, because you're making back-to-back-to-back runs, you have to find somebody to do that for you.
Right.
Because
Okay.
there's no time to get out of the car. So, you have to sort of like look at the run work order and say, who's available when I'm running to come and help me. And so there's quite a bit of that at a pros of like, hey, are you free? Like, I need somebody to help me with my tires, stuff like that. So
yeah, it's probably good to find that ahead of time if you can.
The other thing I would say is if you're not the way we impound at a pro solo is different than at a national tour. So a national tour, you'll come back to your grid spot and you'll have all your stuff and you can sort of like pack up your car while, people are checking out other people's cars, etc. At pro solo, the grid is 2 lines because you're staying paired and those grid spots are refilling after you take off. So impound is actually a separate complete area after all competitors have made their runs and you get released from impound. But just know that like if you've left anything in grid, you're going to have to walk back over there and get it. So you probably want to also just be thoughtful in minimizing some of the stuff that you're bringing as well. Like David said, like you don't need a lot of it. But also just being thoughtful of the fact that like you're actually going to be impounding in a different location.
Yeah, you probably don't need much more than a tire pressure gauge and a water bottle to drink out of, right?
Helmet. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
we'll assume on the tire pressure gauge is a tip that I would say both for novices and people that have done this for a long time is maybe like 10 years ago, we stopped checking tire pressures.
Right.
We don't check it. And there's a lot of it you'll see at a pro solo and at autocross, people just running around all the time, like getting their pressures within 1 PSI. And I'm a pretty good driver and I can't feel a 1 PSI difference. I can't feel a 2 PSI difference. So we just set our tires 4 PSI what we want them, and we don't bother with any of that. We just go up there and run and not worry about it. And that's definitely something I would encourage a lot of people to give a try and not be so focused on, both for novices and even advanced drivers.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's what I tell people on the autocross side is, once you figure out what your tire pressure is, you put your shoe polish on or whatever, and you've kind of got it. Changing it between sessions doesn't make that much of a difference, especially if you're new. It's better to sit in your car and think about what you did right or didn't do right for the next session than to get out and run around and go through all of that. Now, if you've got someone else who can do it for you, that's fine, but you're really not changing much.
Yeah. Even if you have someone to change it for you, there's just something psychological about all this frantic behavior going on around you that I think if you can calm that down, it's just less distracting.
Sure. Kim, any other newbie tips that you can come up with?
Have fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's my favorite format. And most everybody there, if not everyone there, is willing to help people and wants new people to show up and come and enjoy the format. And so if there's questions or, if you're just like, oh my gosh, where do I need to be? Like, just ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Everyone's here to help you. Yeah.
Are pro solos typically on standalone weekends without regular autocross, regular solos?
There are a couple times in the year where they put 4 days of racing back to back, and it will start with a pro solo and then finish with a national tour. So Spring Nationals is the weekend over Memorial Day weekend in May. And so we have pro solo and then a national tour afterwards. And then also, I think we refer to as Summer Nationals, which is the Bristol, Tennessee events.
Right.
So we have pro solo, that is the first 2 days, and then we end with a national tour. I think we got a special guest.
No, I can tell you that is not the first animal that has appeared on this show. So, what's its name?
Her name is Charlotte, and she does not like pro solo as much as we do because we're out of town.
Oh, sure. Awesome.
Yeah, so there's a couple of times where you could do that. And then there's also some times where at the same location, the weekend before is a pro solo, and then the weekend after is a tour. So, you tow your car, leave it there, come back.
Okay. Or take a vacation.
Yeah, we did that one year. There were 2 California events, not too far apart. So David towed the car out to California.
I've done it a few times. But a lot of those too, a lot of the couples that are doing both weekends, everyone's vacationing, so people will meet up in the week in between and do some fun stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. All right, let's do this. Let me take a moment here and thank the people who helped me do this, and then we'll talk about Solo Nationals, which is coming up. And I guess I call it the Pro Solo Finale. Is that the national championship term that they use for that? Okay, so we'll do that in just a second. While we've got the time, though, I want to thank Racekeeper. You'll see their little logo up here. And Racekeeper is the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. That is the camera that documented my wonderfully haphazard experience last year at Solo Nationals. Those videos are up. You can watch them. Also, and their information is, of course, in the show notes. Ray Esports is the official sim racing league of Inside the SCCA. If you want to go and race with a bunch of mostly racers who do it on the racetrack as well, go to Ray Esports and check out their Tuesday night leagues and their weekend warrior leagues. Ray is an SCCA guy, and he does a great job with those. And most people you race with are racers, and they are kind of treat the sim racing like it's on the track, and is a lot more respectful driving in the Ray Esports leagues. Solo Performance Specialties, they are one of our sponsors here. You can check them out at most of the national tours and the pro solos, and he'll be at David and his crew will be at Solo Nationals. You can also find their information in the show notes along with their website. So if you're not going to go to one of those solo events, you can come and buy stuff from them anyway. Really good people. So, and then finally, the raceschool.com, fastlanraceschool.com, is the presenting sponsor of Inside the SCCA. They've got a great racing school here in California. People come from all over the country. When you go to that school, if you pass it, you end up with an SCCA license, and you can go wheel-to-wheel racing right out of that school. Raceschool.com, that is their website. All their information is in the show notes, and check them out as well. All right, guys, we're back here. David and Kim Whitener are our guests tonight, talking Pro Solo 101. Appreciate you running us through it. So when I go to my first one, I'm not going to feel incredibly intimidated, just tinily intimidated, and all of that. Let's transition a little bit, since now we're I guess, what is it now? 8 days away from, well, you guys go first because you're going out for the Pro Solo. So how does that format work as far as the finale goes?
So the format's the same, but I think I mentioned before we're traveling more because there's a points series involved.
Okay.
And so that comes into play at the finale. So at each of the pro solo events through the year, you're earning points both within your class competition.
Okay.
So depending upon the place that you were in, but also in the challenge competition. So how you finish at each of those challenge competitions, you are also accumulating points for that as well. And registration is based on tiers. And so like the first tier of registration opens for people with a certain number of points in their class, and then goes on throughout, so that they really try to have making sure that they hit the registration cap with people who have points, within their class.
Sure.
Ready to go. So the format is the same, except there's no bonus challenge at the finale, because everyone's in for the overall season championships. And the points are, I think, 1.5 or a little over 1 times the normal point value. Okay. So you could, come in with first place points, but then get second place and still end up overall with the championship, sure, depending on how everything fell.
Right.
And then they will crown event. So there's still an event class winner, and there's an event challenge winner, but then there's also the season-long class winners, the season championships. And those season championships end up in the back of the rule book, just like Solo Nationals. And then also the challenge overall. So there's the JCJ Cup, which is the super challenge, JCJ overall super challenge cup. And then there's the Fletcher Cup, which is the ladies challenge.
Got it.
So then those challenge overalls also end up in the back of the rule book.
So there's the event winner, and then the points championship. So is the points championship winner considered the national champion?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. And that is on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Is that the format for nationals or for the finale?
Yeah, so the Friday is just like a Friday before a regular pro solo tour. So there's the practice launches, checking yourself in, all of tech, those things. And then Saturday morning starts competition.
Got it. And then you guys are sticking around to do the solo nationals as well, right?
Yeah.
The only other difference too, I would say, on the format that's a little different than a normal event, that's markedly different about the pro finale, is that because you have to qualify to get in, the idea is that, it's the best of the best are the only ones that are allowed in. Historically, long ago, before our time, it was an invite-only event. You had to be invited into it.
Okay.
You can go to enough events and get enough points, but the idea is that it's hard to qualify.
Right.
So every year there's, hundreds more people that want to enter than who have enough points to make it in. But basically, the idea is at the pro finale, a lot of times in some classes that I've been in, it was the best of the best in our class, and that was it. There was, people that would have been mid-pack or back of the pack weren't there. So it was just really fierce competition. Many years for me, I feel like the pro finale is much more difficult to win than nationals is.
Sure.
Not always.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's really difficult to win that, even just your class at that event. So
yeah, that's interesting because last year was my first solo nationals, and I was going just to take the podcast out to do coverage, and I think it was Hayward who threw down the gauntlet at me and said, "Well, if you're going to go, you have to compete." And I said, "Wait a second. I literally had not done a solo before last year since like 1992." And I'm like, I'm clearly not good enough to get to the solo nationals, and I haven't done anything else. So you don't have to be good. You just have to want to sign up and come have fun. And I was like, I can go compete for a national championship without having to do anything to get there. I just love that concept. And I had a blast, and I'm back this year, hoping to do slightly better than last year. But this, the solo it's an accomplishment just to get to the finale, right?
Yeah. So you really have to do some like pre-season planning and what events you're going to go to and accumulating those points. Mm-hmm.
How many events throughout the year do you have to realistically do to get yourself qualified?
The minimum would be if you won 2 events, that would be enough points.
Okay.
If you don't win those events, you might have to do 3 or 4 to get enough points to make it in. So
Got it. And you'd have to finish fairly well in those 3 or 4 events.
I think if you do 4, then you can qualify just based off of that alone. And that gets you the highest tier. So
Okay.
Also, only your best 2 events count. So it's not like you can have like this infinite number of points. Like,
okay.
So it's not like one person can come in with 100 points and the other person comes in with 40. It's your best 2.
Sure. Sure. Okay, that makes sense. Now, how many times have you gone to the finale and the championships?
I think we went to nationals the first time in 2008.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 2009 was the first. 2009.
No, we didn't even start pro solo till 2010.
Okay.
So
2010
or 2011 probably would have been our first finale.
Okay. Do you guys have any national championship trophies?
Yes.
Both of you?
Yeah.
Very cool. Is it how much of the competition is between David and Kim?
Our first ever teammate, because we typically drive with 2 of us, and we'll usually have one teammate as well.
Okay.
Our first teammate was a guy named Jerry Terranova, who's a national champion as well. He told us something years ago that we want to be first and second, but who's first and second doesn't matter. And I think that's something that works really well for us. I know there are a lot of co-drivers or teammates that are really competitive with one another, and that's not something that really works for us. So I like it. Sometimes I'll go to an event and I'll just have a really bad time, but she does really well. And so, you know what? We still had a good time. So
yeah, of course.
That works pretty well for us. We try not to get competitive with each other. So
yeah, I learned very early in my marriage. I tried to teach my wife how to golf. That not good for the interpersonal marital relationship. So I completely understand that you need to have the right mindset to make that work. So that's pretty awesome. What are your thoughts? We got about a few minutes left here. What are your thoughts going into the finale and solo nats? You guys hoping to take home more trophies, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean we're racing this FRS this year. We've done quite a bit of development, stuff that no one's done. And the car's been in a really good place. It's been pretty dominant. So I feel like at this point, anything can happen. It's not a guarantee that we'll do well, but if I have 2 decent days, I mean, I think I can definitely win. So cool. Kim's running Open and STX Open this year. And I think, a high finish is possible. I think us finishing 1-2, if we both do really well, is definitely not a impossibility. I think that's definitely possible. So, and I think if Kim has great days or great conditions, I think it's possible she could win Open. So
nice. Well, I love the fact that you guys do this together, and I'm gonna see if I can talk my wife into coming out and doing this a little bit next year, and using that mindset that we're not competing against each other would be fine. I'm good with that. But and I also, that's something about solo in general that you don't get in any other form of motorsport. Maybe in rally, because you have a rally partner. But in solo, the husband, wives, boyfriend, girlfriends, fathers, daughters, fathers, sons, mothers, sons, that relationship where you can get 2 people driving the same car, and it's something that you can do as a family in a different, I mean, all of SCCA and motorsports is a family thing, but it's a different dynamic when you're both getting a chance to go behind the wheel. And I just love that.
And like the social aspect of it has been one that we like. We know other couples, that we race with, that we see quite a bit. And, sometimes when we're out in that part of the country, we'll go and, hang out with them for a little while. Sure. And just, it's definitely different being a family or couple thing, that you see these people over and over and over, that you have like a social side. And that's something we really enjoy. So one other thing too, back on what you were saying of the competitiveness, like if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to bring my wife out and we're going to try it. I know a lot of people we've recommended it to have enjoyed other couples enjoy national events a lot more than local events, which is something you would be surprised at. But the other thing on that whole issue of competitiveness is that one thing we found over the years is that a lot of the toxic competitiveness that can be difficult is external, that other people will try to egg us on towards one another, sometimes not even realizing that they're doing it. So there have been periods over the years where Kim would beat me pretty badly for a while, and then even for years later, people would come up to her and go, "Did you beat him today? Did you beat him today?" Okay. Not realizing that's the last thing she wants to hear today.
Sure.
So just be prepared. That's something that's my advice to another couple that's racing of how to do it and be successful at it. Not being competitive works well for us, but just prepared that some of the toxicity will come from outside of it, outside of you. And, being able to shut that down and push it away is something that has definitely helped us be able to do this for as long as we have. So. Yeah.
I would also say the ladies' classes at Pro Solo are fantastic. And so we would love to have your wife come join us.
Okay.
I'm probably going to just shout out Jordan Towns here. She does a dance party in Grid every morning, every afternoon, where, she has a radio in her car. For the longest time, I didn't have a radio. So it's a ton of fun. And the ladies' class is really tight-knit, super competitive with one another, but also really supportive. And it's one of those places, I know David mentioned I'm running Open at Solo Nationals, but I continue to run ladies class at Pro Solo. And there's just so many of us, and the programs continue to grow. I think the Women on Track program has really brought in a lot of additional women. We've made 16 car challenges in a lot of the events that I've been to this year, which is fantastic. Right now, I think we're also spanning across like 2 grids in some events, which is amazing.
That's
and so
cool.
Just really want to encourage, other women who are thinking about it or wanting to join it. Just don't be intimidated by it. Like, we will come show you what you need to do. We'll get you in the right spot at the right time. We'll find somebody for your tire pressures if you feel like you need to do that. But really come join us. We have a lot of fun. The ladies of Pro Solo, it's where it's at.
All right. Well, I'll have to have her watch this, and maybe this will be the convincing moment to push her over the line to go do it. This is the part of the show where you guys get to thank anybody who's helped you along the way, whether it be, friends who've helped you out. If you have any sponsors, the floor is yours.
I mean, we're not super, we don't have a lot of sponsors. There's a shop, Texas Track Works, locally that helps us out. And then Ann and Andy Hollis were the people that helped us get into doing national events. And then we've had 2 teammates over the years, and Andrew Hahn and Jerry Terranova that were sort of long-term teammates that we've raced with that have been really beneficial. So
very cool. Very cool. Anybody you want to thank there, Kim?
Same things.
Very cool. Very cool.
Tag 'em.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to finding you in Lincoln and meeting you in person and all of that kind of stuff. I really appreciate taking a few minutes this week to help me out with this. Also, want to let people know that tomorrow night, a special episode of Inside the SCCA presented by RacingSchool.com. We've got Brian Mason. We're actually going to record an episode right after this one. It'll come out tomorrow. And at the same time at 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to talk about the Club Spec classes, the Club Spec Mustang, Club Spec Mazda MX-5. New to the club this year. They're going to be at Solo Nationals. We're kind of getting an update on how that's going. Brian has driven both of the cars. I've only driven the Mustang. So it'll be fun to hear what he's got to say and what the experience has been in the first year of this new class. So that's going to be tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock on the West Coast. And we'll have Brian on here for that. And then, of course, special coverage from the Solo Nationals. We'll have, if all goes well, I compete Tuesday, Wednesday. So I'm not guaranteeing a Wednesday show, but I'm hoping to have a show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday if I get enough interviews out of the way on Monday. And we're going to do that from Solo Nationals. Definitely Thursday, Friday, definitely Tuesday. Wednesday's the one that's up in the air, depending on how crazy it is for me on the competition side. But we're going to have that from Solo Nationals. Looking forward to that. And we'll do it from there. That's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com. If you like what you saw and like what you heard, subscribe, please, to the RacingWire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube. Appreciate all of that. And if you like this episode, leave a comment. You can leave it here on the YouTube or on the podcast page. You can follow us on social media to find who our next guest is. It's the Racing Network on Instagram. Also, Racing Wire Info on Twitter. New guests every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend and go play with cars.
I'm Abby Shear, and when I'm on my way to an autocross, I listen to the Inside the SCCA podcast.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racing Wire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests and not that of the SCCA.